You're listening to the I'm Busy Being Awesome podcast with Paula Engebretson, episode number 213. Hey there, welcome back to the podcast. How are you? Are you also grappling with the fact that we are already at the end of August? Because I am. And in fact, that is exactly what inspired this week's topic. Because in today's episode, we are exploring this transition from summer back to fall, and for some of us, back to school. Now, here's the deal. Whether you have kids or not, or you're going back to school or not, what I do know is there is often this notable shift into the fall season. I know there is for me, for sure. And in fact, I often think about the fall as the other new year. There's just something about this time that signals a real shift in our days. And many of us might actually feel some mixed emotions about this, from this shift from summer to fall. Again, I definitely do. And I think that this is actually a beautiful situation where we can hold two contradictory truths at the same time. For myself, I know that I am both sad to say goodbye to the relative flexibility and the freedom that accompanies the summer months. And I'm also really eager for the start of the fall and a return to the regular routine and starting more traditionally fall activities and doing so with a bit more structure. So while I am sad to say goodbye to the more free days of summer, I'm also excited to say hello to a little bit more structure with these fall activities. Two contradictory truths can be true. And today we're talking about how we can make this shift from summer to fall in a way that feels much more supportive for our ADHD brains. Because as I talk about all the time on this podcast, our cognitive flexibility, meaning our ability to shift and transition between routines and schedules and in and out of tasks, this can be a real challenge for many of us. We can find ourselves feeling kind of untethered or a bit foggy or even on edge. And this can happen both on a small scale. For example, if we're moving from the weekday into the weekend or vice versa, or it might happen when you go on vacation for a week and then need to come back to your daily life. But it can also show up in bigger ways on a bigger scale, like the shift from summer into fall. And today we're talking about how we can make this latter shift from summer to fall a little bit easier this year. And to do this, we are going to explore 5 different steps that I encourage you to consider in your own life. Now, you may notice that some of these steps are a little more applicable to your current situation than others. And if that's the case, great. Okay. So as you listen to these 5 categories today, notice which ones seem like they'll be most helpful for you as you shift from summer into fall. And I encourage you to lean into the ones that stand out the most to you. So step 1 of our 5-step process is to create clarity around what's most important to you during this shift. Now, I know for myself how easy it is to get overwhelmed thinking about all of the different things that need to happen as we shift into fall mode. Just off the top of my head, based on recent conversations with clients and things, we have new sports and after school activities for kids. We have back to school night. We have people going into work more often in person because during the summer, they might be working 4 days instead of 5 or whatever. We have establishing more regular bedtime routines. We have making time for all of the different life admin tasks, things like grocery shopping and cleaning and yard work and all the things that you maybe had more time to do in the summer on the weekends and things when the kids didn't have their entire day taken up by sports tournaments and things that tend to happen more often in the fall. And when we think about these different transitions, we want to plan for and accommodate for them. And we can get wrapped up in trying to get a handle on every single thing at once. Right? We're thinking of all of these things and we're going, oh, I have to plan for this and I have to accommodate for that and I have to make sure about this. And we're telling ourselves, oh, I have to do it all now. And instead, With step one, we want to create clarity on what matters most. So, as a throwback to episode 207, our first step in helping us ease this transition from summer into fall is to navigate any overwhelm by zooming out and focusing on what's most important to you or you and your family this season. What matters most to you as you make this shift? Where do you want to dedicate your time and your attention? If you have kids, is it getting all the school supplies and everything that they might need, the physical things that they might need so they're prepared for their first few weeks of school? Is it getting back into a sleep routine since a lot of us tend to stay up quite a bit later in the summer with the longer days? Do you want to focus on how you can maintain the fun and connection time that was so important to you in the summer so that you can maintain that into the fall? Because frankly, it's pretty easy to slip back into work mode and kind of forget about all the fun and leisure of the summer. So before we do any kind of planning for this kind of transition, before we start taking any actions, we first want to take a few minutes and identify what matters most to you about this fall season and as you transition into this fall season. And also ask yourself, what might make this transition easier? Whatever answers you find can act as an anchor for you as you make the shift. You can use these answers to help ground yourself when things start seeming like too much, when your brain starts going, oh my gosh, all the things are important and I have to deal with everything right now. We can pull back to our anchor and go, nope, this is the thing that matters most, right? Rather than the brain going into the spin cycle, we can instead come back to the one thing that matters most and make your decisions based on that. So for example, if you decide the most important thing for you and your family is getting back into a regular sleep routine, schedule and routine is what I'm trying to say, getting back into a regular sleep schedule, then when all the questions about sports and homework and schedules and extracurriculars and all the things start popping up into your mind and you're trying to figure that all out, you can use the goal of sticking with a regular sleep schedule as your anchor. And you can ask yourself, okay, well, with all of these things, what decisions are going to help ensure that we're getting enough sleep? How can I use all of these things that I'm wondering about? How can I come back to my anchor of, will this support my goal in getting enough sleep or sticking with our sleep schedule? Or if the most important thing is maintaining fun time, even though the fall tends to become a bit busier and more scheduled with, less fun things, you can keep coming back to the anchor of, how am I ensuring that I'm scheduling and honoring that fun time each day or each week to recharge my batteries? How am I ensuring that I'm making time for fun? Am I adding too much? Am I committing to too much over here with all of the committees and volunteer things and everything at school? Or am I making sure to reserve this time for fun? Because that is what I decided is most important as I transition from summer to fall, maintaining the fun time. So step one is to reflect on this transition from summer to fall. You could even do a brain dump of all the different things on your mind, all the different commitments that are going on and the meetings you need to attend and things like that. And notice all the thoughts and the obstacles that your brain offers about this shift. And then slow that down a bit by asking yourself, what matters most in this transition time? Where do I want to focus my attention first? What would make this shift a little bit easier if I put my focus there? Now that brings us to step two, which is to create space. What needs a reset, a physical reset in your life? So as we think about moving into the fall season, we may also require a shift or an update in our physical space. And I'll give you some different examples of what this means. So let's say your dining room was kind of the holding place for all the summer projects. Maybe you had the drying rack for all your pool towels there and kind of anything else that was in progress or ongoing throughout the summer, right? The puzzle you were working on, the art projects that the kids were doing, that sort of thing. And now that school is starting back up, maybe we want to swap out the pool toys for the designated homework space after school. So that might be a physical change, a physical switch that we want to make your space ready for the fall. Or maybe it's time for a clean slate with all of the different papers that have gathered throughout the summer. You know, the fall can be a busy time and a lot of papers can come in, especially if you have back to school things. So, what we want to do here is maybe do a reset with papers. So, first, you would go through all the current papers that you have, the piles of mail, the flyers, the art projects, etc. And we're going to sort those into piles depending on what's most relevant to you. So, it might be a pile for paying, right? Bills and things. Maybe there's a pile for act. So I need to take action on filling out these forms, and then a shred and a recycle and a file, something like that. Whatever categories would be applicable to your situation. So that's our first step is we're going to take all those papers, we're going to sort them out into these piles. And then second, maybe we create designated areas for the fall season. How do you want to approach incoming papers? How do you want to handle that? Do you want to have just one big basket that everything goes into and you go through it each week? Do you want to have a little more categorization so you have some different slots for your kids' forms and permission slips, and then one for bills and one for invitations and upcoming events or something? So again, step 2 here is all about getting your physical space ready for fall and making this transition easier. A couple of examples that I gave might be creating a homework space, putting away the summer things. It might be going through papers and things. Notice for you in your space what might be helpful. What would make this transition from summer to fall easier? And how might we take one small action to get that into motion this week? And this brings us to step 3, which is all about timing and planning. Now, the shift from summer to fall is perhaps most strongly felt when we think about the timing of things and how we approach planning our days. Now, for many of us, we are moving from a relative flexibility during summer to a more structured routine or structured schedule. Now, this isn't the same level of shift for everyone, right? Some people kind of maintain the same schedule all year round. But even then, there's usually some discernible change that unfolds with this shift in season from summer to fall. So I think it's important to ask yourself, realistically, what does this shift look like on a daily basis? What does it look like in my getting ready, in getting to work, in meal times, in after school times? What is this going to look like as we make the shift based on time and planning? So at the university where I worked in the summer, the administrative staff had the option of going to 4-day work weeks, and they would extend their work days Monday through Thursday, and then they would take their Fridays off. So maybe your company has something similar, right? Maybe you have a shift like that. So now you're gearing up for another work day to return to in the fall. What's that going to look like? What are the shifts that are going to happen for you? Maybe you now have 2 different school pickups and drop-offs because your kids are now at 2 different schools, and you need to account for that in your planning and your scheduling of things each day. Maybe there's increased pressure around deadlines at work, and the sheer amount of work starts picking up at your job. Maybe in the summer, more people take vacations and there's a little bit more flexibility around deadlines and expectations for response time and things. Of course, this isn't all jobs, I know, but for some, it might be. And now we have this shift in expectation to quicker response times and faster turnaround for deadlines and a general increase in workload now that people are back from vacations. And all of that might require additional time or additional planning. Or maybe we think about it through the lens of routines. For example, maybe now that the kids are back to school and you're making their lunches, you decide that you want to pair their lunch with making your own lunch for work the next day instead of grabbing something from the food truck or whatever is in the break room during lunch. But with that decision comes the need for new routines. So maybe when you pick up your kids after work, you decide, okay, when we get back home, we're going to empty out our lunch boxes together. We're going to each empty out our lunch boxes. And then the kids are going to grab their granola bar and their fruit and anything else they want in there while you make the sandwich or whatever else you're putting in. And then you gather them up in each of the lunch boxes and you all put them in the fridge so they're ready for the next day. Maybe you're working on a routine like that. Thinking back to our idea of, again, creating time for fun from our previous episode, perhaps one of the biggest challenges in terms of time and planning with this transition from summer to fall is a more full schedule. So if we know that that might be the case for us, how do we want to intentionally schedule downtime? How can we create that time for rest and play outside of work or school? What's actually realistic for yourself during this season? How can you use this information to help you honor that time that you need for rest and play? Then we get to step 4 of 5, which is ironing out the wrinkles of transitions. So, of course, this episode is essentially a look at the big picture transition from summer to fall, but step 4 is a micro look. So now we're zooming in at this overarching shift. Often I find what we try to do is pack way too many things into our days because we forget about the time that's required for transition between activities. We can't just automatically shift. So we forget about the time to get our shoes on or to gather up all the homework and find our computer cord and get into the car. We forget about the additional traffic, which always seems to get so much heavier after the summertime, right? And work is back full force. How do we make this big picture transition from summer to fall easier? By ironing out the smaller wrinkles of these minor transitions throughout the day. I like to think about doing this in 3 steps. Okay, so the first step is gaining awareness of what's actually happening during your day. So thinking through your day and creating awareness of what those actual transitions are and when they happen. Step 2 is acknowledging and accepting that they are there. Those transitions happen. It doesn't really help to fight with the fact that we're going to have more traffic, right? But sometimes we just avoid it, or we're like, well, there was that one time in July when I got there in 10 minutes. I don't want to have to allow for 30, which is what's normal during the fall. Rather than fighting with reality, we instead acknowledge and accept that. And then from there, we actually build in the time we need to ease that shift so that we're not feeling so rushed. Because again, the truth is these transitions are going to happen no matter what, whether we want them to take time or not. Just because we don't want traffic to be so bad doesn't mean it won't. I mean, that'd be great, but not usually the case. So we might as well acknowledge that time. We might as well allow time for it in our plan so that we're not feeling that constant pressure all the time. So again, what are the changes happening for you as you move from summer to fall? Identify those and then ask yourself, okay, well, what does this timeline look like with these shifts? So some examples that I've already mentioned might be the fact that you're going into the office one more day each week. So this not only includes the additional transition of commute time on Friday, for example, but you also have one less free day in your schedule. There might be also the additional transition of pickups and drop-offs for your kids at school or their different after-school activities. There's that transition when you get home from work or school, when you need to get a snack and then transition into homework or getting ready for karate class or whatever. There's probably this transition to earlier bedtimes, like I mentioned as well, since a lot of us tend to stay up a little bit later in the summer. So all of these things add up. All of these transitions add up. And sometimes the smallest shifts can make such a big difference. I always notice, for example, when it gets cold out, cold enough that I can't just head out the door with my sneakers and Bruno when we go for a walk, and instead I need to bundle up, right? This takes extra time. And when it gets really cold and I have to put Bruno's coat on and sometimes even his boots, which take entirely too long. Yes, I am the person who puts boots on their dog. But here's the deal. The rock salt that they put in the streets burns his little paws so bad that I have to put boots on him so we can actually walk outside in the winter. But again, all these things, I would never anticipate that it would take extra time, but it does. It can add an extra 10 minutes in the morning. And those 10 minutes, you all know those 10 minutes make a big difference when you have something scheduled for early in the morning. So we want to account for that. Pay attention to those little bits that sometimes go unnoticed. We just kind of think, oh, well, it always takes me 30 minutes to get out the door and, whatever. No, actually, now that we have this shift and we need to get our lunch boxes or we need to gather all the homework and put it into our backpacks or we need to do these extra things, that's going to take some extra time. We want to allot for that because it all adds up. So again, think through your days. What are the transition points, especially with your new schedule, and identify them. Acknowledge them and then plan for them. And this brings us to step 5, which is to give yourself grace and space to make this shift. Again, this transition can be an uncomfortable one for some of us. And step 5 is to give yourself the grace as you figure out these new routines and these new rhythms for yourself and your family. Even those of us who rebel against routines, the sheer fact that we are challenging our rhythms and the current status quo of how things have been operating, that can leave our brains feeling untethered, especially when we're not the ones who initiated this change in routine. Instead, it's just something that happens with the change in the seasons. So you might find yourself feeling uncomfortable during these adjustment times. You might feel foggy. You might feel spacey. Maybe you're more on edge and little things set you off more than they usually would. Maybe you're making more mistakes than you usually do and you double book yourself or you're misplacing your keys or that permission slip or you're overextending yourself. You're committing to one too many things. This isn't fun. It's not a great time, but it's also a completely human thing to experience during times of transition. So if you notice this discomfort, I encourage you to really give yourself so much love and grace here. And same with your family as they're in the uncomfortable transition too. And as often as possible, please check in with yourself and ask, what do I need right now? What feels off? How can I support myself? And listen for that answer. When things don't go as planned, or you do double book yourself, or you snap at your family about things that normally just kind of roll off your back, check in. Use this signal to lovingly ask yourself, hey, what's going on? How can I support you right now? What do you need? And notice what comes up. Because chances are you are in this messy middle of transition, and it's very common to feel this as you make the adjustment. And I promise you will adjust. You might find that you're missing some of the relative freedom of the summer. And maybe as you listen to yourself, you realize, you know what? I'm missing that. I've overscheduled. I've taken on too much. I need some of that relaxation time back. Because all the time that I did have in the summer has been eaten up by all of these transitions as I play parent Uber to and from school activities or whatever. Maybe you're missing the time that you loved in the summer to kind of putter around early in the morning in your garden because the sun comes up way earlier in the summer and you have that time. But now everybody needs you as they get ready for school and you have to help them find their socks or whatever. Or maybe you find you need more sleep because even though you're back to a more rigorous schedule, you haven't really adjusted your bedtime to allow for more sleep so you have the capacity to do the more demanding things. So maybe we need to make that shift. We want to make space for that. We want to give ourselves the grace and the space to figure out what's uncomfortable, why it's uncomfortable, and then we want to make any adjustments we need to. I have this analogy coming to my mind right now. It's kind of like when you're trying on a new outfit that's not your usual style. Okay? This is our transition into fall. We're trying on this new outfit. It takes some getting used to, and you may need to make a few adjustments. If you don't like a particular fabric, you're like, I don't like this. It's not soft enough. So you need to make a adjustment in the fabric, or maybe you need to cut out an itchy tag or something. but eventually you kind of settle into the new style. And for the areas that never do settle, we want to check in. Again, where can you make a shift after learning what it is you need or what's not working? If I stick with the new outfit analogy, maybe you realize that even though everything fits properly and you've cut out the itchy tags and now you have a 100% breathable cotton, you just don't like high-waisted jeans. That's just not your jam. No problem. We can make an adjustment to make this new outfit work for you. And the same is true with this shift into our fall schedule. If you find that something just really isn't working for you with the schedule, that's okay. This is where we make a change. And the best way we can approach that is by checking in and seeing what you need and what works best for you to help you make that shift as supportive as possible. So, as a quick recap, as you navigate this transition from summer to fall, I encourage you to follow these 5 steps and leaning into whichever ones stand out most to you. Number 1, create clarity on what's most important. Where do you want to put your focus this season? And use that as an anchor to help you move through the uncomfortable transition. Number 2, create space. What physical spaces might need a reset or a shift to help you get ready for the fall season? Step 3, identify the changes in scheduling and timing and create clarity on what supports are going to help you make that often increased demand on your time more doable. Number 4, get clear on the smaller transitions that are happening throughout your day. Identify them, acknowledge them and accept them, and then make a plan for them. And then number 5, give yourself the grace and the space to be in this period of transition as you figure out what works best for you and your family right now. And as always, let's connect about this over on Instagram. I am at I'm Busy Being Awesome. I would love to hear what's working for you as you shift from summer to fall. All right, my friends, that's going to do it for us this week. And if you're ready to take these concepts deeper and apply them to your life, if you're ready to learn how to support your ADHD in a way that works for you, then I invite you to check out today's show notes or head to I'mBusyBeingAwesome.com/group to learn more about my small group coaching program, We're Busy Being Awesome. If it sounds like a great fit for you, you can add your name to the waitlist and you'll be the first to know when the next cohort enrolls. Also, have you grabbed my free ebook called 10 Tips to Work with Your ADHD? It's filled with actionable strategies that you can use to reduce your overwhelm, reclaim your time, and get things done. You can grab it now through the show notes and put them to use today. Until next time, keep being awesome. I'll talk with you soon.